Hey guys, Slynk here with another Feedback Friday episode, and this is actually episode number 10, which is crazy. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different for this episode. After 9 episodes of Feedback Friday, commenting on what I think is good or bad about your song, I've started to notice some common mistakes, some common problems with your songs. So for this week, I've come up with the top 10 most common reasons why your song really sucks.
Top 10 reasons why your song really sucks.
There's not enough sidechain. I know there's never enough sidechain, but you've really got to focus on the drums. The drums are the driving force of your track. And if you can't really hear the drums or they're sitting in the background, it's kind of hard to dance to your song, you know what I mean? Put a little bit more effort into finding some good samples or creating some good drum samples yourself. I've got a couple of tutorials on how that's done. And focus on sidechaining them. Your drums should be cutting all the way through the mix and dropping the volumes of all of the elements. Most of the elements in your song should be sidechained to the drums. And you don't need to get a big pumpy effect. You can sidechain without a pumpy effect. Just lower that release time a bit to say 15-30 milliseconds at the most. You won't even notice that it's been sidechained, but the drums will cut through and it'll just make your song sound so much more, it'll just give it more energy, you know? More sidechain. Your mixdown needs a lot of work. It sounds muddy and confusing, and some things are louder than other things. You've got to balance the levels of all your elements in your song so that there's no sounds that just sound way louder than everything else, you know? Some sounds should be quieter than other things, so just use your creative intuition and just balance things correctly. What really helps is just having some good speakers to listen on, and especially with the low end, I recommend getting a sub pack because you can really feel what's happening in the low end. EQ things so that they have their own little space in the spectrum, especially in the low end. In the high end, you can kind of have some things overlapping each other. You know, say you've got some hi-hats and you have a twinkly synth line. That's fine. They can kind of overlap each other. There's a little bit more leeway there in the high end, but in the low end, you've really got to concentrate and make sure that your sub and your kick are working really well. And of course, sidechain will help you with that. So learn how to sidechain, learn how to EQ your elements into their own space in the spectrum, and you'll get a better mixdown. The notes that you've chosen to use just sound a bit weird. You've really got to brush up on your musical theory. You know, it's not that hard. Just instead of sitting down to write a song every day, maybe every second day, watch a couple of tutorials and learn how chord progressions work, how to play more interesting chords than just your simple triads. Learn about the 7th chord, learn about the 9th chords, learn about chord inversions, play with the musical elements and the notes that you're using to make it sound interesting. I like the concept of taking a simple chord progression and just executing it in a very complex way. You know, you might just have a simple 2-5-1 chord progression, but instead of playing the triads, you know, play some 7th, 9th chords, inversions, mess with the timings of those chords. If you've got a chord progression happening up here in some synthy chord line, make sure the bass is kind of following the same rules that you've set with the chords up here. The bass should be moving as the chord moves. You can choose different bass notes that are not necessarily the root note of that chord, but the bass note will still complement that chord, you know? You can't expect to tell a story with your song unless you know how to speak the language of music. Just learn a bit more about musical theory and you'll be way, way ahead of most producers. Your song is way too long. Way too long. How much time do you really need to get your point across? What's the point that you're trying to make with your song? Are you trying to say, yo, just dance? Or are you trying to say, it's time to sit on the couch and cry? Or, you know, whatever your point is, you just need to get your point across in the most concise, condensed way possible. Having a really long song can be okay sometimes, but only if you're really doing something very interesting throughout the song. You know, a solo or several verses with the vocals. The vocals are telling a story, but just droning on for 7 minutes with basically the same elements is just painstakingly long for the listener to listen to. You got to grab the listener's attention and keep it, and think about how you can keep their attention. And usually all you need to do is just condense all your ideas down to, 3-4 minutes. It's really easy to just go wild and write a very long song. And I often do that when I'm writing music, but then I'll go in afterwards and just, trim away the fat, trim away the garbage that you don't need, cut that section in half and put all those ideas together in that one section, or just flip between the ideas quickly, and that will capture the attention and keep the attention of your listener all the way through the song. The goal is to write a song that people will listen to all the way through and enjoy it all the way through, and if they do enjoy it all the way through, they'll want to listen to it again. Test the song out on your friend or your girlfriend or whoever's around and just see if they're like stoked to listen to the whole thing. If they're not, you've got a problem. It's probably way too long. Your drops are just a bit underwhelming, and I think the problem is there's not enough anticipation leading up to the drop. You know, really build that anticipation, big rising sound, drum crescendo, have a little bit of silence right at the end of the build up to really illustrate and draw attention to that transition from the breakdown and build up to the drop. Boom! Make your build ups twice as long as you normally would. You'll really feel that anticipation happening with your song, and when it finally drops, it has so much more impact, and you just want to like dance, you know, you just want to go crazy. You can use the same advice in the bedroom. And it's not hard to make a riser, you know, just get some white noise, filter it in, some repeating vocal chop, yo, 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 and then like right at the end of the build up, yo, we're going to drop it hard, boom, you know, that kind of thing. Like whatever your creative intuition tells you to do, but just think about the listener. Think how you can build more anticipation. You've got to have peaks and valleys in your song, intense parts, chill parts. The song structure will help you build your anticipation as well. Holding back on some elements to use later is a good way to keep interest later on in the song, and structuring your song around that idea is a good way to go. You know, start your song off with maybe some not so great drums, some sort of chill average drums, and then, you know, build into a drop where you bring in your good drums, you know. Hold off on the bass line in the intro, bring that bass line in when you hit the drop. Change some of your percussion elements halfway through the drop to like keep the song moving. You know, structure your song so that there's always something different happening. One thing I learned from DJing is that it's not about the song playing, it's about the next song that's about to play. You know, you can kind of think of structuring your song in that sense where it's not about what's happening right now, it's about what's gonna happen later on in the song. Structure your songs so that there's some peaks, some valleys, and so that it's just not so flat. You know, changing one or two things in the structure of the song as you go is not enough. If you're really struggling with song structure, just find a song that's kind of similar to what you're writing and drag it into your project and just create key markers on where things happen. You know, here's where the breakdown starts, here's where the build up starts, here's where the build up ends, this is where the drop is. And that's a really simple trick to just brush up a little bit on your song structure. Just copy someone else. You guys aren't using enough stereo width in your songs. A lot of elements just sound really center and flat and boring. Stereo width is a good way to just make that sound sort of surround your brain. When you add stereo width to a sound, it almost tricks your brain into thinking that it's a little bit louder too, because it's kind of encasing your whole head with that sound. It's so rich and wide and everything like that. So if you're struggling to make that key sound in your song stand out like you want it to, it might be getting drowned by sidechain and compression and getting drowned out by some of the other elements. You can make it stand out a little bit with stereo width. It's really easy to add width to something. Look up the Haas effect, which is basically delaying the left signal from the right signal very slightly by say 7 or 10 milliseconds. Your brain, when it hears those two sounds slightly delayed, perceives that as stereo width. You can also use a chorus, which kind of does the same thing in a little bit of a different way. You can do the same with guitar, you can do it with vocals, but in a different sort of way. Let's say you're working with a vocalist. Get the vocalist to sing the same thing, exactly the same, twice or 3 times. Pan one of those takes to the left, one of them to the right, and one in the center. And you'll get this surrounding vocal lushness that a lot of producers use. Listen to any pop music and you'll feel that. And it's as simple as just taking a few more takes. Same with guitar. Play the same line twice, 3 times in a row. Exactly the same. Pan one left, pan one right. And it's beautiful. You know, it just surrounds your whole head. And you can do the same with snares. Don't use the Haas effect on a snare. Use a little stereo width on just the very high end of the snare and maybe the tail of the snare, and don't go overboard with it, and it'll just give your snare a bit more depth. You know, it's kind of like boosh, and then it like a boosh surrounds you afterwards, you know what I mean? Your sound design is good, but I think some of the sounds could use some more movement. A sound that kind of evolves as it plays. use those LFOs, use those envelopes so that when you play the note, it changes as it's playing. Use some effects to widen the sound a little bit. Really get in there and do a lot of detail with your sound design. This doesn't apply so much for like, say, glitch hop music, where you've just got a bunch of different sounds coming at you from everywhere. That concept of having a lot of sounds coming from everywhere is what gives the bass line as a whole some movement. Don't just slap a flanger on it, like mess with the wavetables, make it change from a saw wave to a square wave or something like that. Bring in an overtone halfway through the sound. Open or close a filter as the sound travels. Increase the width of the sound or decrease the width of the sound as the sound plays. In Massive, you've got a couple of LFOs, a couple of envelopes, but down the bottom right corner, there's actually some elements that a lot of people don't realize that you can use. Like there's the velocity element and there's also the randomizer element. Drag the velocity element onto any knob, and depending on the velocity of the note that you're pressing, it will change the position of that knob depending on the velocity and the range that you've set. And the randomizer element, you can drag that onto anything as well. And every time you press the note, it will choose a random position for that knob to be on. And that's a really great way to give your bass some more movement, some different characteristics. Every time you press it, it's a little bit different, There's heaps of effects in Ableton that you can use to give your bass more movement. So don't just focus on what's inside the box on your synth. You've got filters, you've got distortion, you've got even flanger, chorus. You can layer all these effects together in a rack and then mix between them using the chain volume. There's so many things you can do. You can bounce your bass line down and then cut it into pieces and reverse it. Put a backwards reverb on it. The possibilities are endless. You've just got to experiment, try different things, push the boundaries with your bass design, and just give those bass lines a little bit more movement, You need to put all of the elements in your song in a similar space. You can't just take a ton of reverb and slap it on one element and leave everything else dry. It's going to make your song sound really disjointed. Writing music is all about gelling and gluing those sounds together to make it sound like one song. Having a lot of reverb or echo on one sound and everything else is dry, or just most things are wet and one thing is dry, it's going to sound disjointed. It's going to sound like I'm listening to the song and the song was coming from two different rooms, or I'm in two different places at the same time, and that's not possible. Set the stage for your song, give your song a space, and apply reverb or wetness or echo or whatever you're using to all of the elements so that everything gels and glues together and makes it feel like one song. Generally, however, it's a bad idea to put reverb on a sub bass, for example, or the deep sub frequencies of your kick drum, but you can definitely add some reverb on that high part of your bass line, like the whomps and the growls and stuff like that are layered on top of your sub. The transient of your kick, you can definitely apply a little reverb on that. Just don't go overboard. Sometimes it's really nice to move the whole song from one space to another very quickly. Say in the build-up, you can use the same advice in the bedroom. Everything is getting very wet and very reverby, and so everything's drowning out. It's just when you come in with the drop, everything's super tight and clean and everything's right in your face. So you can certainly move from one space to another with your song. You just have to take everything with you, the vocals, the drums, the bass line, the guitar. Everything has to move from one space to another space together. Trust me, it sounds really weird when you've got a vocal that's dry and then a bass line that's like, sounds like you're playing it in a huge hall or something. It's just like, why is one member of the band over here and the bassist is over there? It doesn't make any sense. Put every member of your band into the car and you can drive wherever you want. Go on a magical journey for all I care. Just don't forget anyone. Once you've got your song sounding good and you upload it, please make sure that you brand it right. Tag the songs with the correct genre tags. Don't upload a house song and call it a drum and bass song or something like that. Do a little bit of research into the music that you're creating and tag it appropriately. People aren't going to be able to find your music unless you tag it right. You've got all these drum and bass fans out there and you're writing drum and bass music, but you've tagged it as a house song. Why did you do that? Don't you want these people to hear your music? You've got to brand yourself right. Don't try and be edgy and tag your song like I don't know or too meta for genres. Don't make up a genre either. Like don't call your song Complix Hop, Swag and Bass, Sex Trap, Neuro Chill, Drum and Bass Core Wave Hop. Just use the correct genre, please. And sort out your artwork and logos. You can pay $5 to someone on Fiverr and they'll design you a logo from scratch. It's really cheap. There's no excuses. Some good artwork that comes behind the song will just make you stand out a little bit more. It'll make your song seem like, oh shit, this guy's professional. He's got some real artwork. He's got a nice logo. I'm sure you've got a friend who is a designer that can help you out. And if you don't, you can always jump on YouTube and find some tutorials on Photoshop or whatever. But I recommend just hitting up Fiverr. Pay someone $5, just do a logo for you, and it'll make the world of difference when you're trying to promote your song and gain more followers if you brand yourself right. So that's the 10 most common reasons why I think your song sucks. A lot of you probably already know this stuff, and the hard part is just the fact that you're a beginner and you're not super comfortable with Ableton and all the plugins yet. That's totally fine. Just keep these tips in mind and keep practicing, and next time you write a song, hopefully it doesn't suck as much. I really hope you learned something this episode, and thanks for watching. We'll be back with the normal Feedback Friday episodes next week. Have a kick-ass weekend. Peace.
Shut up. Cool like money, like cash, like paper, like an ice cold brew. Coming fresh at the freezer, yeah. Cool like cruising with the top down, 69 Cadillac. Times in the back, how we doing so cool like fresh snow. Right around the west coast, burning that good vibe up, shake the tempo. Cool like, whoa, maybe you don't know.
Cold crush, chill 'em when we get on the floor.